You want to do the honors?
Well, thank you, James, very much. Well, welcome to the July 28, 2021 Disaster Council meeting. Thank you all for being here. Call to order. May we have the roll call, Andrea, please?
Mayor Sticks,
Here.
City Manager James Vega,
Here.
Chief Rivera,
Here.
Councilmember Wyrick,
Here.
Mr. Bob Daddy,
Here.
Interim Public Works Director Alma Quezada.
And
Oh, sorry, and Chief Mundy.
yeah, Chief Mundy.
Just walked in, thanks.
And also, actually, there's one other member. I think Bob Roper is joining us via Zoom.
Bob Roper?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I'm on.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Okay.
Hello there.
Thank you, Andrea. And moving on to number 2, approval of the agenda. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. Then moving on to number 3, approval of the minutes.
So moved. Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Wonderful. Okay, moving on to number 4, public communications. We have any public communications, Andrea? Okay. All right, well, we'll move on to the discussion action items. Number 5. Number 5 is A, the subject discussion of fire preparation and planning. And I would just like to say a big thank you to Bob Roper. Thank you so much, Bob, for making this incredible plan for Ojai and really being of service to the community. Very grateful to you, so thank you. And thank you to the rest of you for being here, because it's all about safety and taking care of our community. So.
Thank you. I think kind of our goal today is that Mr. Roper has prepared a draft wildfire resiliency plan, which is included in the packet to today's meeting, and I think the ultimate goal today is to review that plan, and then I believe the request is to approve our, for the Disaster Council to recommend that the plan move forward to the City Council at the upcoming meeting. And so really the bulk of today's meeting is going to be discussing that wildfire resiliency plan and giving feedback and some potentially directions. So the packet included the plan. Hopefully everybody has it. If not, we can get some copies for anybody who needs it. But that's kind of the goal today. So I think with that, I was going to ask and Mayor Six, if it's okay with you, if Bob Roper could kind of start by walking us through the plan.
Well, I'll be happy to. I'm
Can I
currently.
ask a quick question? Just how would you like to handle Q&A, Mr. Roper? Would you like to first the whole presentation, then we begin, or as we go section by section?
Yeah, let me go through the entire
Okay.
thing, and then we'll go through each bullet item and see what happens. For the viewers on the screen, if somebody there wants to put it on the internet, is fine, or if you want to share the screen, and I'll put it on.
So I'll see if we can share the screen. In the meantime, if not, if somebody goes, or anybody who's watching, if they log on to our Ojai website and go to the calendar on today's event, there is a Disaster Council event, and you can click on that, and the plan will be on that screen as well. But we'll see if we can pull it up.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and get started then. The purpose of this plan was to try to design what the public and what the city can do as the city of Ojai, recognizing that if we're going to have a wildfire, it's not going to stop within the city limits. And so this is only something that the city council has control, and it would be hoped that at the conclusion of this, whatever action that the city council finally takes, it would involve some dialogue also with the county. With that being said, there's basically within the federal system, There was a study that was passed in 2010 by Congress that really divided the wildland fire into a cohesive strategy that deals with a robust response, managing landscapes, and creating fire adaptive communities. We're fortunate that within Ventura County, you have a great fire department as a fire district. You have a partnership with CAL FIRE and the Forest Service, along with local fire departments and the Sheriff's Office of Emergency Services. So the robust response system, this plan does not address because we're already in a great area. As far as restoring and maintaining our landscapes, this is an area that we need to address. The actions that contained within do not address those right now. But these would be the areas, say, below Shelf Road, on the downhill side of Shelf Road. That is private property, but they have native fuels on them. This is where the fire district and the U.S. Forest Service will work with private individuals on how to reduce the amount of fuels there, but also in consideration for the erosion control issues and so forth. But for this purpose, we're acknowledging it, but we're not addressing those at this time. So really, we're going down to the third bullet item when we talk about creating fire adaptive communities, because this is something that the city can work with the public to really make a tangible difference. This plan also will deal with what can the city do as a city function to meet the challenges of wildland fire. You can go to the next page, please. Okay, so we'll just start with the action steps here. And all along, what we want to do is identify the home hardening guidelines. Currently, the city works with the fire district, and we incorporate the portions of Chapter 7A of the Building Code for wildland fire, but it pertains to new construction. The largest fleet of homes that are out there are already what's already constructed. This is where we need to go in and do home hardening. So the recommendations would be is take a look at the best practices that are already identified by different scientific venues like the Institute of Business and Home Safety and so forth, and have the Building Appeals Board review and adopt these recognized guidelines so that they would be recommended voluntary actions at this time. Number two is to create messaging boards at each end of the city. This would be something that the public would gain a regular message on, whether it's temperature or other message, but they grow accustomed to it, similar to what the sheriff's signboard is down at the Y intersection. We're looking at putting something at the Y intersection and one at the other end of 150 out by the city boundaries. Third, resurrect the CERT function of this is the Community Emergency Response Team. Over a period of time, the fire district, along with Brian Brennan, has been instrumental in getting the CERT teams functioning, but in the past, it's always had a volunteer CERT coordinator. Those people have retired or left the city, and right now, that function is kind of languishing as far as an organized event. We still have people with training, and the fire district is actually coming on now with some online training for the future to make it even easier. But this is what we need to coordinate along well with the Ojai amateur radio operators. Number four, ensure that the city's EOC function has the capability to disseminate information. This would be the information given out on signboards, proactive alerts out to the community on the web page, on all social media platforms, and the AM radio station. Next page. Okay, number five is work with the Red Cross to increase the scope and the scale of the evacuation shelters. Currently, the Ojai Valley uses Nordoff High School. We have always found that Nordoff High School is marginal from the aspect of its size, and also because usually if we have a wildland fire in the valley, the air quality is compromised. So those with respiratory issues need to leave the valley, and the Red Cross looks at opening other shelters in the Ventura area. But we need to look at, with the challenges of COVID, parking, and so forth, how can we increase the capability of evacuation shelters or areas? Number 6, create a viable risk assessment of the city so that city leaders and the insurance companies can look at what have property owners done to reduce the true risk of the wildfire hazard area, and in response to that, could there be enhancements or insurance coverage or insurance rebates for a reward for doing the home hardening? Number 7, conduct public workshops to raise awareness of the wildland fire problem. This is where the city coordinates neighborhoods, whatever size community meetings, to educate the people on what can the people do before a wildland fire happens? How can they properly prepare themselves, their homes, and so forth? The other advantage of doing something like this is that you could also have another series of workshops where you invite the insurance industry in to educate people on the proper process and what should be in a home insurance policy for coverage in case of a wildfire causes damage. Number 8, create an alert process so that everybody knows if there's an emergency. In today's world, a lot of people are tuned in to XM radio, to Netflix. They may not be looking at their local radio or listening or watching a local TV station. So what we have to do is figure out how can we use social media and other new programs to at least alert people. One of the ideas that Malibu is entertaining right now is to put back into air raid or civil defense type sirens in an area to at least alert people so that then they can go to their respected news authority to get emerging information. Number 9, create and implement a regional fuels reduction process. This deals with the Arundel issue in certain areas of the city, as well as what we talked about up along Shelf Road. Number 10, use the CERT teams to create a cadre of volunteers, they could be retirees, to do voluntary property maintenance and mitigation practices along with the Ojai Fire Safe Council. And this could be actually mitigation work, and this group could also help work with the city to staff vital EOC functions during an emergency. Number 11, have the Disaster Council approve these actions and then forward to Council for ratification. Number 12, it was done in May, and this was a community readiness event just to be able to show the public what the law enforcement and fire district can provide them during the course of an emergency. And number 13 is, this is maybe the key to a lot of this, is to evaluate the possibility of the city to hire a contractor and or assign a city person to manage these action steps and also partner with the Office of Emergency Services. And the reason why number 13 is important is because you need some type of coach or coordinator just to make sure there's a lot of steps here, but somebody needs to start talking to the county OES, talk to the fire district, work with law enforcement and the Red Cross. There's a lot of work to do here. And it's a lot of work that needs to be done initially. Some of the scale of the work would be reduced. It could be assigned to a city staff function later, but at least to get a lot of this up and going, this is going to require somebody to have this as a targeted job function. So I'll let you read the rest of it, but this is kind of a tap dance to try to get all of this work done with the budget limitations of the city, not to put all the burden on the city. This is really going to require a partnership with the county, as I talked about in the very beginning. So now, if you'd like to go back a page to page 2, we can just talk about each item. And I guess, whether we do this today to get more information and or it would come out at the council meeting, this document needs to have columns put on the side that would identify who's going to do each one of these, how are they going to do them, and when would this be done? Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind. So I'll just throw it open for any comments or suggestions to the action step number 1.
I'll just quickly comment. Action step 1 is actually a good one to start with, because the plan has a lot of good information. I think one positive I wanted to note is we have started some of these things, and I'll kind of mention them as we go along. But action step 1, council or disaster council member Bob Daddy could probably fill us in on the date if that's been selected, but I know that there was a date being coordinated for a building appeals board meeting to review the guidelines in second week of August, I think was what I had seen.
I think we're a couple of weeks out at least.
So the one, that's one, as we talk about assignments, the city council has assigned it to the building appeals board, and we're coordinating that meeting for middle August. So that one is in progress.
Could I comment on that?
Mm-hmm.
I think I was the one that made the motion, actually, to assign that to the BAB. And it's a matter of just nomenclature. In terms of what we actually asked the BAB to do, Bob, was to come up with recommended changes to our local building ordinance. That's a little distinct from adopting recognized guidelines. We were looking at some recommendations for specific over and above state code for our building ordinances. So I just want to draw that distinction between adopting recognized guidelines and actually adopting particular building code enhancements. Have a little more teeth. So I just wanted to state that for the record.
This is Chris Danch. Is it possible to comment now, or are we just holding public comments till afterwards?
I think that the disaster council would definitely appreciate hearing from the fire safe council on these. So I guess I'll speak for us and say, Chris, feel free to chime in as we come across these. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. Just respond to number 1. What we're doing with respect to that is we have a pending CAL fire prevention grant. We'll know end of August, early September, the outcome of that. And I'd like to describe in full what that grant entails. It's a countywide collaboration, though there's a significant Ojai component to that grant. And with respect to the home, there's 6 distinct projects in the grant, one of which is a countywide home hardening strategy. The ask for that's about $600,000. That would put in a liaison in our area for a 2.5-year period to train and conduct assessments within our area. We are talking to 2 catastrophic carriers to participate in this. We have our private industry partner, Jensen Hughes, looking to standardize the data collection and management coding. So these 2 companies are very interested in working with us on a risk modeling program that can be used as a model and a trial here in our area. And of course, this data will go toward informing the Building Appeals Board and the City Council as to what is really important. I will also say that shortly on our new website, we'll be posting recommendations to homeowners, the top 10 cheap retrofits they can do. There's also guidelines on how to get insurance. But we have a lot more information coming in that regard. So, but just with the home hardening thing, that's a significant effort in a phase to really get going on a problem that is the challenge of home hardening is consistency and scale to make a difference. Because if you harden your home and your neighbors don't, and you're within the zone that can do this, that can burn, your house is going to burn. So how to do this? I mean, this is a problem that's been addressed community and cities across the West on how to get this done. It is a complicated problem. So we're trying to do this from a very organized standpoint. So fingers crossed on the CAL FIRE grant. I'm happy to talk more about that. Happy to send people the narrative if they want. The warning is it's 100 pages long. But that's just on number one. So we are making efforts towards that. Also, the Fire Safety Council does, upon request, give home hardening assessments. And the technical name is structural ignition potential assessments. They're about 3 hours, and we result in tiered recommendations. There's also one you can do online on our site for your own home. So we'll be making them, make sure the public's aware of that. It's been out there for a long time. But anyhow, that's as to number one. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else have any comments on item one?
I have a comment. What I'd like to do is go back to the discussion item, discussion page. I am very alarmed. I have had a meeting with Chief Roper last few days. I've gone around the city and I've done a little bit of reconnaissance, and I'm alarmed that we are bringing in massive amounts of bio mulch. And the bio mulch was the cause of the Upper Ojai Valley School being burned down. The embers get onto the mulch, the nice dry wood, all the great stuff we have. It blows up against the building, it incinerates the building, and we're done. So for this purpose, on this page, item 4, it says that we took down 230 trees in Stewart Canyon. And what that means is we've got more than 500,000 pounds of biomass stocked up, ready to go, being nice and dried by the summer, waiting for the embers to come in and hit that thing. And that 70-mile-an-hour wind we have 5 months ago, which we know fire creates its own wind, we're going to distribute 500,000 pounds of mulch, burning mulch, around the city. And I just don't understand why we're putting fuel all over the city to incinerate us. Whether it's at Matilaha, whether it's the place across the street, we have areas that have got huge mounds. We also have the city dumping all of its chips in the flat lot up above our maintenance yard. We have mounds and piles, and when the embers hit those piles and that wind comes, we're going to start losing all this stuff. So it's not just the forest outside the city. It's when it gets in the city. We literally have, and I'll distribute pictures if you like, rooftop corner to rooftop corner that are within a foot. There is no defensible space around there. So I know we passed this thing over, and I really want to make an issue of the fact that we've got that fuel sitting there. And you're going to have to be faced with the fact that you're going to have to build or acquire a waste dumping area. And that biomass fuel is now no longer going to be able to be spread on top of the ground, where it adds and causes our problem. It's going to have to be buried where we can recycle it, let it mulch, let it, do whatever it does, plant on top of it something. But continuing to haul this fuel in, we now know with this new generation of fire behavior that we have to change our behavior. So I just didn't want to let that go. Thank you.
Yeah, I've reached out to the biologist on the Stewart Canyon project to get an update on the mulch plan. So I'll update the disaster council on that.
Well, it's worth noting that the original contract included a provision for mulch removal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That hasn't been fulfilled.
It has not been done. Out of 10 days ago, I was up there and inspected it with
No, I'm
an
not
outside
disagreeing with that.
contractor.
I'm
Right.
saying that was in the original contract.
Speaking of mulch, though, where I thought you were going to go was something that has come up recently. A couple of people have sent comments on, and just something maybe for the BAB to think about. Are the we've had a couple people ask if the city mandates those leaf guards on drainage, and I don't know if that's something that the Building Appeals Board would look at as part of that fire hardening project. So.
We will look at everything recommended by any reasonable person, the city council, the city manager, the mayor, any of the council people. We will look at that, and I think that ties in with what Mr. Danch of the Fire Safe Council said. You can do everything you want to protect your house. When the house next door goes, you're going to lose yours. And if you had gone to the neighborhood where Mr. Danch is, on the other side of the rock quarry, you'd see that 2/3 of the houses were lost. And they were really lost because of their neighbors having not prepared and hardened. And so that was a real tragedy.
I can add to that, since I live on North Fork Springs Road, just a walk around after the fact, the no house was burned by vegetation, except I believe one was ignited by palm trees, but almost other than an initial ignition from probably some kind of ember cast, almost every home that was lost because the houses burned themselves down. It wasn't contact with vegetation, and it was apparent because you could stand there and look at the greenery around it, and the house is burned. So what Bob is saying is absolutely correct. In fact, after years ago, we had a meeting up here with the Ojai Fire Safe Council before I was involved or even knew of it, and we had a 3-hour presentation on this. My wife and I went back and made changes to our home. We also made a list of what houses would go and what houses wouldn't go, and our list was 99% accurate based upon that information we received. So this information is important, but like Bob says, unless it's consistent, it's very difficult to get it so it's meaningful at that level of consistency and scale across the board in neighborhoods.
I just wanted to point out that in terms of responsibility and assignment of action, it is the county that shut down the green waste processing site off of Baldwin Road, and they've been promising reactivation of that site for almost 2 years now? And I believe that's out of Supervisor Levere's office was taking responsibility for that. And, that's a fire issue as well, not having a proper green waste processing area in the valley. And it seems like if there's any way of pointing out that that's not just a convenience issue, but a fire risk issue for the county not having gotten that site back up and running, we might want to point about that. And then the other thing is, we may have to pay for this, but in terms of the large mulch piles, there's no other way of getting rid of them. I have a feeling Agrimin would be happy to come get them.
Yeah, that's true. On the green waste site at Baldwin, the city, as far as what's the city done on that, we've sent some support letters identifying the environmental impacts and the fire safety impacts on those. So we'll continue to try to make that point. So. Anybody else have anything to add on item 1? If not, I think so. We've acknowledged that the BAB has had a similar assignment, so we might want to. I'll work with Bob Roper to kind of refine that language so it matches up with what we're doing. So, all right. I guess we could just go kind of item by item and get feedback. Item 2 is the creating the message signboards at the end at each end of the city. We had actually talked about this in depth at the last disaster council meeting before COVID occurred, and we agreed we were going to talk to I think it was Camarillo and get some quotes because they had installed some signboards near their city hall that people thought would fit well in Ojai. So that got paused to some extent with COVID. I don't believe we ever got a response, and we didn't necessarily push the issue during COVID. What we did do in the meantime was we started to utilize the city's police trailers, which Chief Rivera and the Sheriff's Department assisted with, and we've been updating regularly. I think they're out right now, advising the public that they can download the My Ojai app for push notifications to their phone, which is I also see as something listed on here too. And so we're using those now. So that one has been, I know we had multiple discussions on it at Disaster Council. We had meetings where we maybe had decided to hold off a while. Then we had meetings where we decided to move forward. So that one might not be one that we fully debate today, but I think it's worth putting a little bit of thought into if we should include that and if that should be on our plan to move forward. So I think with that, I'll open it up. Yeah.
Well, certainly it should be on our plan. I would hope that it would also include, and we find out what other jurisdictions have done, making sure they stay up and running in the face of internet and power outages.
Like solar.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Battery backup with solar.
Yeah.
How do they get programmed if they can't be done here at City Hall anymore for some reason? I mean, I just think that needs to be part of the plan.
I think as far as like when we talked about creating a table with the assignments, I think the other thing to include would be potential costs. I was going through these as we were going, and a lot of these we either are doing with the current budget or we can do for minimal cost. This is probably the big one that there would have to be some budget associated with it. So that would be something at a future meeting we can schedule, review some plans or options for some signboards, and then recommend to the city council to approve some budget for it. My estimate, I know when I give estimates, people tend to cringe because I think people think they're high, but I would wager for 2 signboards, probably all in $100,000 is what I would think. So.
If I may, as I skipped over the fiscal stuff, one of the noteworthy things is the county of Sonoma applied through FEMA for what they call the BRIC, B-R-I-C grant. They received $37 million to do exactly some of the same things that are on this list as well as fuel reduction projects. So FEMA is out there ready to start funding some of these things. It would be a grant. It's an ongoing open grant submittal, but that is probably one of your best alternatives to fund the list of items on here, just so for your information.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. We'll definitely look at that. Maybe my estimate
Well,
of 100,000.
I'll also, James, I'll also add that part of our deal under both the pending SFA grant and the CAL FIRE grant in the building of both a countywide and a local CWPP, updating the countywide and doing a CWPP and the home hardening, is to actually build capacity so that we can assist the city or the county or both in applying for FEMA, the BRIC grant. Those are a great deal of work. They're not easy to get. So neither the city, the Fire Safe Council, or anybody has the capacity right now to go after that. So we're looking directly at building that capacity to either be the designated agent of the city to do this, but that's something that's definitely in the works. But they're challenging to get.
Thank you.
Mr. Vega, can I make a comment since we've skipped over and we're talking about budget? It is clearly time with this city having its 100th anniversary and being in the financial situation that we continue to be in. We need to look at some proper avenues of revenue. And what we need to start with is what elections do we have the rest of the year where we can put a ballot initiative to raise our sales tax 1%, earmark it for fire safety, fuel reduction, money for people to write grants, those things that will harden us, protect us, remove the hazard. I think the people would go all in. The problem we have is no one knows who pays the taxes. I believe that 75% of all the sales taxes are paid by visitors, not by the people here. And I would like to know if we have time to put an increase in sales tax on the ballot. I think it would be overwhelming. I've done a few ballots before, like Flow and a few other ones, and the Measure C and a couple of things, and you're going to get full support from the paper. But it's time to explore. And the key is, do we have time this year on the ballot? That's what it's going to take. It's going to take a vote of the people. We want to make sure it's earmarked, and we want to make sure that everybody understands that we will need 2/3 votes to get this thing through. I don't think that'll be a problem, simply because we have a fire emergency here. We're having this drought. This thing is getting dry. We have a massive amount of dead biofuel everywhere. And we know that fires now, they're a different dynamic. They create their own environment. They don't create fire tornadoes anymore. They create fire hurricanes. And so I think that as I read this entire thing, what we can do is we can look at every item and say we don't have the money. That's what we're doing. We're looking at every item saying we don't have the money. And I think we need to resolve that. People here, for some reason, want to be like Santa Barbara. I think they could get their wish. Santa Barbara has a special 1% sales tax for roads. We could use it for fire reduction for the next 5 years. And then at the end of 5 years, have it revert to roads and save that $1 million out of the budget that we're spending on roads that we can't get under control and can't get paved. We got a 30-year paving cycle, and it deteriorates in 15. So I think if we explain that to the people, they'll be more than happy to pass one of these things for fire safety and roads. But if we can't get it on the ballot, it becomes a moot point. So that's the place I think we should start.
Another place to start is what we suggested, and that is to follow Marin County's idea of a parcel tax dedicated to wildfire safety. In this case, we would be creating a community wildfire protection district, a community wildfire protection district. My early discussions with a whole number of stakeholders indicate that's actually a very popular idea. And it's very modest tax and one dedicated, and the sales tax can go to the roads and other infrastructure, but this one, because that's what the plan and the county-wide CWP update is to actually divide the county into community wildfire protection districts, and then look at how to fund each one of those based upon their unique challenges and characteristics. And Ojai, being the top at risk in the county, has its own deal. So I believe that that's another avenue, in addition to possible sales tax. We're looking to the TOT under Measure C. And that's something we are working on, and I would love to make I've mentioned it to the City Council in other presentations. I'd like to go into it more detail in a presentation to the Council as well, because I think that's also another avenue that we can take that holds a great deal of promise, and I think would be well received. The Marin County one was passed overwhelmingly with support, like 80%. So, and it's modest, but it really adds up, because we are talking about millions of dollars to do the stuff we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Any other comments on that item? All right, so that one I think we're in progress and we'll move forward with. Number 3, resurrect the CERT function. I have terrible eyesight, but I think we have Brian Brennan on the call who's involved with that. Andrea, do you? Oh, okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
As you know, Bob, thank you for the shout out on that. We've had almost 1,200 folks, both in the city and in the county areas of Ojai, train on CERT in-person training in the past. I see Robert Ashby's on here. Robert's doing a great job coordinating now, getting people involved, but it's online training. But I do think it's I would say that what did happen, I think, is people started to lose a little interest, because once you get trained in it, you want to get involved in some events or be doing something. And I do think it provides as Bob mentioned, a sort of a volunteer corps that can be used for other things, maybe just outside of perhaps they say the fire safe areas also. People want to get involved in things if cities having an event or whatnot, along with the amateur radio club. So I think the continuation in that role, I think it's a role that would need to be, I don't know what the capacity, certainly I know staff is way overworked, but the capacity of trying to see who steps forward as perhaps a volunteer, maybe in that area, to want to take on some of that role. But I know initially the Supervisor Bennett and now Supervisor Levere has allowed CERT to be sort of, what I say, managed to some degree out of the supervisor's office here. But again, that was in the past, and certainly I think now that we're starting to drill down, I think finding somebody that's in the community of the city of Ojai that maybe has, even if it's a part-time position or something along that line, I think it would go a long way to helping revitalize the interest, and then also the ability for them to maybe, if there's a bike race, there's certainly Ojai days or things like that, not just having a booth there, but maybe being a part of helping staff some of the street and parking lot management and the functions that maybe be able to save you some money where you're perhaps hiring security, or maybe in the case of even having to pay a sheriff or somebody to be on site, maybe certain people could take up that role also and save some of that money that might in turn be able to go toward the paying the coordinator. So I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for being here. I appreciate that. Do you know of anyone in particular? Any names that pop into your head? Or anyone
No, I'm actually going down through the list. I think, I'm going to, excuse me, I didn't have my video on. Going to send out an email to the almost 1,500 email addresses we have, letting them know about Bob's presentation to the council. I believe is that August the 11th, I believe?
10th.
August
10th. Thank you. Letting them know that, and then seeing what interest and see as people contact me, or certainly I can vet some of those folks and let them know the opportunity for revitalizing the program.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, Captain Ashby, for being here too, participating.
So,
Well, I guess I'll just say, I guess I'm a little disappointed. I think I was going through this list, and very few of these I thought were kind of like in progress, that we had like a partnership going on. And I think the CERT function one I had written, in progress, the supervisor's office. But I think what you're saying is this is not going to be handled by the supervisor's office at this point. Is that kind of the takeaway?
no, not overall. I mean, certainly it takes a lot of effort, and on the ground, I'm happy to stay involved. I got the impression in talking to a few folks, the city was actually looking for somebody they wanted in the city itself. Maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, I think one of the things for me with this plan is and Bob Roper and I met before this emailed before this meeting, and we were talking about this, that for me the one thing I need to stress to the community and to all of our partners is the city and its 28 employees are not going to be able to handle a fire event on their own. It's going to have to be a full partnership with and I think we're building that. I think we have that with the fire department, the fire district, with the sheriff's office, the police department, and I had really been thinking that the CERT was going to be a big part of that. We talked last meeting about the phone tree idea and trying to get volunteers in the community involved in the phone tree idea, and so. For me, I think it needs to be a partnership, but one of the points you made right off the top of, there's 1,200 people in the community trained. It's right off the top, it's out of 30,000, Ojai Ojai Valley residents and not just the 7,000 city residents. And so it would really, to me, to work and be effective, it's going to have to be a partnership with the county and the city. So I'd be interested in talking about that, but I think that the county needs to be involved in that process. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I apologize. I guess from future, I'm given the impression the city was looking for somebody themselves, but we'll certainly, Supervisor LeBeer has offered up myself as a resource and his office as a resource and liaison between county fire and whatever we can do to help this go forward. So my apologies if I was given that impression, but no, we certainly still want to stay involved.
Brian, from past year's CERT, we had the emergency program, we had the yellow cards in the window. CERT was incredibly active. I'm wondering when you say about being inactive, I've heard two different things proposed this morning. One was get a group that can actually come in and help mitigate and do some actual work. And it's not all of the tree committee, which actually plants trees, but we could get a certain group of people. If we could get volunteers where we know that we've got identified issues with problem houses, where we could get volunteers that may help and coordinate that with Fire Safe Council, I think that would be one way to get more people active. I think the other way to get people active with the proper training is you could get a number of people that could survey and evaluate and give people some information about what they need to do to mitigate the risks on their property. They could be trained in that. So what we could do is we get this large mass of volunteers spread out throughout the entire valley that have a couple of different programs going simultaneously, which is reduction and then education and hardening. And I would hope that maybe that's something that CERT could do and coordinate with the city. I think our best bet is to have the citizens talking to the people in their neighborhood. I remember when CERT was heavily involved and we had neighborhood captains, and when there was an issue, this one person said, I've got these 3 streets. I'm going to knock on every single door and I will be responsible for everybody on this street. I'd really like to see that revitalized. I think that the hazards and the dangers to our valley are so great because you can't see the burn marks anymore. It's grown back and it's so dry and it's so small, and the smaller it is, the faster it burns. So if that's something that you can communicate and get going with the city, that would be perfect. If you need to be able to do things other than your email, and you need some public announcements in the paper, I'll make that happen for you for meetings and awareness for your group. Okay, so if you need that, let me know.
Bob, thank you for that offer. I did want to, in terms of the volunteers sort of clearing, I would say that we found that I will say probably 70% of our CERT membership are probably over the age of 65. Was a number of folks that were in the mobile home parks that felt very, very vulnerable. I did want to go also state that certainly, Bob, your comments are very well when you don't see the burn marks. I think we had the most active, the most awareness of CERT maybe after certainly the floods, the rains, and in 2005, 2006, when the valley got cut off. We started the program in 2007. It was very, very, lot of enthusiasm from 7 to probably 2010. But then, it was getting harder and harder unless we had a catastrophic event, and the class would fill right up, and then it sort of slowed down. But that being said, we will continue to go forward and get the email out, let them know what's going on with the Fire Safe Council and with the mayor's initiative, and see, and then have people contact me to let them see what type of role they're willing to take on. But and out of that might come somebody that want to be a coordinator both in the city and up there in the valley, in working in tandem with Supervisor Levera's office. So happy to continue to work on that, and glad to see it. It's a priority, and we certainly will provide resources out of Supervisor Levera's office in that regard.
Any other comments on item 3?
Anybody want to get certified with me?
There you go. It's online presently, and then there will be in-person sort of coordination depending on how many people do, and that will be to work with the fire extinguishers, cribbing, and sort of search and rescue and triaging. That would be an in-person type of meeting, but the majority of the program is certainly the background is available online, and very good program.
Great, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I apologize. I need to step off at 11, but I will continue to stay involved and monitor both these meetings and in person with the city.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 4, ensuring a viable city EOC function for information dissemination. And it includes several sub-bullets. I'll kind of start this one just quickly by saying this is one of those things I mentioned at the beginning, that some of these that the city has put a priority on over the last couple years and has started. So although this is a big lift, this whole plan, a lot of these are in progress, and I think we've had good progress on this one in particular. Here in the city, we've gone from when the Thomas fire hit, and we had employees who did not know where the EOC was, to now we have a functional EOC where people know their assignments. We've had tabletop drills that included both police and fire and the county EOC, and got to actually do some drills based on real world situations. Like I think we did landslide and we did fire. Unfortunately, we joked because we did a landslide drill, I think like the week before the pandemic, and we said we chose the wrong topic for the drill. But we've had those trainings. We've gotten up to speed. Some of these things like being able to, for the city staff to send text messages is one of the bullet points. We, over the last 12 months, we've implemented both text to gov software, and we've implemented the My Ojai push notifications, so people can now get those. That's something the city had not had in place prior. The sign-up campaign for push messages, we've started to do an advertising campaign for My Ojai, but it's on our list of things that we want to continue to push and push harder for. So I think that is one that I would keep on my to-do list for us as the city. Monitoring social media platforms, that's something that we've started to do finally, but we still have work to do. Creating a city intelligence process where staff learn to monitor live webcams. And so that, E and F are the two that I'll just make this comment. E is the one I just said, staff learning to monitor live webcams. F, creating city EOC functions that have resiliency. We are doing more than we've ever done, but at the same time, when we talk about having staff monitoring live webcams and things, this is where the comment I made a couple minutes ago about ultimately the city has 28 employees. When we had the Thomas fire, we kept City Hall open. We had 5 or 6 staff here, and then we had the crew out in the field, which is about 12 people, which ultimately meant we had 4 or 5 people left to run the EOC 24 hours a day. And that I would say is probably going to be a fairly typical situation. So whenever we have items that have the words like resiliency or like having the staff learn to monitor live webcams, I also want to be realistic in that we are not the county of Ventura with what are they up to, 3,000 employees now. We are not the city of Oxnard with 1,500 employees. we have 28 employees, including our, our public works crew and trolley drivers. So, I want to be careful to promise too much on that. Even when we talk about resiliency, we have, in a typical EOC, we have probably 2 people in each sector. And so there's not a whole lot of resiliency you can add to that. So, but it's also a good reason to tie in with, having the CERT functions and things where we have volunteer teams that we can utilize. So, but in short, for me, I wanted to just give the update on how we are trying to launch number 4, the EOC function, and I think we've made good progress to date. So.
I have a comment on 4E. We had a couple of, and this is in the area of, especially with short staffing, you need to work smart, just not work hard.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a couple of proposals that were, I think they came through Jamie Fleming and the Chamber of Commerce, with basically combined artificial intelligence and more dense video monitoring, so that basically, my understanding, you could actually program for certain types of events to alert rather than having you just do full-time monitoring. Have we vetted those proposals fully in terms of how they may or may not be integrated into a city intelligence process, or are we still work to do on that?
There's still work to do.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Vega?
Yes.
How many people do you expect it would take to get to the resiliency portion that we need? 4 people monitoring and being 24 hours a day is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
How many people do we really need? Do we need 20 or 30 that can come in as a trained volunteer basis to supplement what we have? I mean, we certainly can't expect 28 individuals in the type of mess we have.
Right.
Still going through this pandemic, still having issues, and this fire is relentless. And so the question is what do we really need?
Mm-hmm.
Do we need a different type of a solid organization that's going to be a backup? Do we need to go to our established organizations and get volunteers from very long, very solid nonprofits? We go to the Land Conservancy, you've got the Fire Safe Council, you've got CERT, you've got a bunch of people. If we can get a few volunteers from a half a dozen long established entities in our community, how many people do you think we would need to have trained and ready to go and understand the process?
Yeah,
and
I
be
think
certified.
You're on the same path I was on. That's why I stressed. I really do think the need for the CERT is key for a lot of these things to be successful. But I would estimate we would need probably 50 to 60 well-trained people, because the other thing to keep in mind is what we found in the Thomas Fire. I won't name any groups, but some of these groups that we've talked about today. When the Thomas Fire hit, there were no volunteers coming. It did not happen. We made calls to some of the groups, and most of the valley was evacuated. So that's where, for me, I also have to be realistic in that I can control staff, and I can make sure that staff are where they need to be. I can't control volunteers. And so that's where I'm trying to be clear about, like, with our current staff, here's what we can do, But I do think that, again, is why I spoke about CERT. I think that would be a crucial piece to having the level of people that we would need to do a lot of these things functionally during an emergency. So I guess my question, and Bob Roper, I know you drafted this, so my question would be, have on that item, have staff learn to monitor live webcams. What are we monitoring for? What would the expectation be that the city staff would monitor webcams for?
The current webcams out there would be used just to validate reported smoke, what direction, is there a call or not. And where this is just important is it takes a while to get good information back through county fire, the sheriff's organization, and so forth on emerging incidents. You have an appetite by the public for instant information as soon as they smell smoke. So by developing a function, it wouldn't have to be somebody who's out there just glued to a computer screen all day, but it's whether it's the webcams or some other sources, it's and or communicating with county OES and county fire. It's a way to validate the situations that are affecting the valley so that you can give out good information. This was one example.
Yeah, I think for me, I've created a process we didn't have when the Thomas fire hit, which is we have a direct contact or a few direct contacts at the county EOC, Gil Ramirez and Patrick Maynard and, various people like that. So I guess my thought would be, and I'd be interested to hear from police and fire on this too, because we all coordinate through the county EOC during the events, would be our role would be communicating with the county EOC. And the reason I'm saying that is my first reaction to the idea of like having a staff person who trained for a few hours 2 years ago on how to monitor webcams and have them see smoke and send an alert out to the public would not be probably very effective or reliable. So I would ask police and fire, you guys are kind of in the same boat. Your communication comes through the county EOC, correct? And, do you have staff that on top of that are monitoring these webcams and things?
So on the wildfire front, we have two different sets of cameras. We have
Mhm.
the county's cameras, county OUS cameras. We also have Southern California Edison cameras that are a lot more Edison cameras than county OUS cameras. And so in the event that any wildfire happens within the county, we have immediate access to those cameras to see exactly what it is. Is there truly a fire there? And
Mhm.
we reported a wildfire. We can put a camera to that general area pretty close. There's still a few areas that are still sheltered that the cameras don't hit, but for the majority of our area, we can see. If there's something there, we'll see something.
Mhm.
And then obviously we have our appropriate responses that go to the wildfire. But we can get a pretty quick look as soon as we get a response if there's smoke coming from that area. And like Ojai Valley, from Red Mountain, there's some cameras on Red Mountain that kind of get a little bit into Ojai, but not necessarily into the valley. So they're a little bit short going out into the valley and then also on the east end. There's some up on Sulphur Mountain, but they don't point into the valley.
Well, that's what I was kind of talking to about these proposals to increase the video monitoring density and combining that with artificial intelligence seemed like worthy of looking into a little more. And that was my only point.
There's certainly more coverage area, and I I'll speak to this from those. I know what OS cameras are, and I know how many they are. I know what the location is. But the ones that seem more robust right now is Southern California Edison's cameras.
Right.
But everybody has access to them.
Right.
And
They are.
county OES monitors the SE cameras as well, correct? I guess my point in that would be that I think I feel like our strategy should be to work through county OES on those types of things rather than try to create our own intelligence branch. And I don't know of really any city that has that in the county, and we're the smallest of them. So, Chief.
Yeah, in that respect, I think it's probably good to get information from one source. A lot of times if we have somebody monitor, they see smoke and they put that information out. It may not be a wildfire. It could be an isolated burn. And now we're putting out information about, seeing smoke up in the hills or whatever it may be. And that creates panic within the community, and that's something we really want to avoid. So I think, when we have a situation like that, we usually put boots on the ground to confirm what we have and to either confirm that there is a wildfire, and we start sending resources out in that way, and we start to evaluate the size of the fire, how quickly it's burning, and in what direction to figure out what our course of action is going to be within each community. So I think that's important to do that. If we have somebody here that's monitoring something and they see smoke and they put it out, that might, like I mentioned, it might just create some panic.
Yeah, Mr. Vega, let me just say that when I drafted these recommendations, it was done in the absence of knowing what you have implemented since the Thomas fire. And so I'm fine with modifying this document to be reflective of what you've done already. And so what we're after is the key bullet point at each number, not so much the sub bullet points on how to.
Okay, yeah, and that's something I'd be happy to work with you on. It's kind of laying out what the intelligence process is that we've established.
Yeah, I've sent you an email that you can look at later.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have anything to add to these? Or as part of number 4 in the bullets?
Just a quick, I'm curious, I was reading a couple of days ago about a program called Fire Guard through the Pentagon, military intelligence data. Anybody happen to read about that? I just wondered if anyone's had any contact with that. It's supposed to be reapproved for the national wildfire policy, but it's basically using satellites and drones. So
Yeah,
that's something that seems as if that's the wave of the future. And there is a bill that's being proposed to go through Congress by someone, Zoe Lafgren from San Jose, and to really focus on scientific research on wildfires, predict, prevent, and combat destruction, especially, and taking climate change into consideration. So that's something that's definitely on the front burner right now in the federal government, so that's good news. So that's all. Thank you.
Anybody have anything else on number 4, or should we move on to number 5? We'll move on to number 5. Work with the Red Cross and law enforcement to increase the scope and scale of evacuation shelters. I think people are aware, this is another one that's in a way in progress. We had several meetings at the city council level last year as essentially Red Cross had told the county that they will be stretched thin moving forward with the size and scope of these types of emergencies, and how, as Bob mentioned, fires are getting more severe and bigger and more widespread. And so Red Cross had notified the county that they would be stretched thin and they needed more partners. The county then notified the cities that the cities would take on responsibility for their evacuation shelters. And our city was the one city that really pushed back and was able to actually get some modifications to that agreement. Reminding the county that we are in a very unique situation and that we have 30,000 residents who evacuate into the city that are not necessarily, or actually in the majority are not city residents. And so with that point, the county was, they worked with us to modify that agreement so that we would share responsibility within the city. And I think everybody knows, but I forgot people are watching. So when I say that, what I mean is if a fire happens in the Ojai Valley, everybody goes to Nordoff, even if you live in Miners Oaks, Miramonte, Oakview, potentially Casitas. And so we were able to get that modification with the county. So we've been working on that and trying to work with the county and Red Cross to make sure that we have evacuation shelters ready and able. The other thing we did, based on a disaster council meeting probably about a year ago, is we agreed as a disaster council to request to the county that we get some sort of agreement in place to utilize Sewell Park. And so we have submitted that request to the county as well. So we are working with relevant parties to try to increase the scope and scale of evacuation shelters and make sure that we have staffing and resources for those. So just again, as we start, and I want to always mention where we left off on these. So I think on that one we've made good progress, but there's still work to do. We still need to finalize that agreement on Sewell Park. So.
I'd like to add to number 5, and that is that part of the CAL FIRE grant that's pending is a wildfire transit vulnerability and evacuation assessment study. Includes demographics and modeling. And so if we are successful in getting that grant or other funding for that, that will give a great deal of information about how to improve our evacuation planning. It also looks at increasing options in terms of whether it be evacuation centers, TRAs, shelter-in-place options, things like this. So hopefully we can get that funding, and I believe that assessment will provide a great deal of information to the City Council and the county going forward on how to best plan in a catastrophic situation for our 30,000 people.
Thank you.
Within the county sphere, I'm wondering why the Oakview Community Center is not designated. It's got the scale, it's got the scope, it is larger than the Nordoff facility. And when you take a look at the mere money, Oakview, it will provide a lot of relief. It's on the main area, it's got adequate parking, it is a big facility. So I'm thinking of, that's the only other facility I know that's ready to go, that's pretty much turnkey, you could just go in. I don't know what we do about sharing the 150 cots for people to be around and pre-positioning and pre-supplying and stacking, but if we're going to get in with the county, let's have the county give us some help. Let's have them stack that as another refuge center, a shelter. I can't think of any other buildings that has the clearance and has the safety issue where we're not going to have a problem. So I would hope that we can get the supervisor's office to maybe carry that torch for us.
And is not to put anybody on the spot, but police and fire, is there any talk or plan to use the Oakview Community Center? Does that ever come up, or any reason why we wouldn't?
I've never heard that one.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard it either, but it's funny. Ironically, I rode my bike by the Oakview Community Center the other day and thought, oh, I wonder why this isn't used more. It is kind of a nice unused site. So that's something. We have a contact at the county that we're talking to about Sewell Park, so we can wrap this in and ask them if they have any plans to use it and why or why not. So.
Just to add to that, I think if we realize, and I think we've learned the lesson, the Thomas Fire, it's not just people, but animals, large and small, that need to be handled in these refuge centers, and we need the capacity to do that. And maybe we need to think about the capacity of the sites to handle that. If memory serves, the fire department had an interesting situation in the Thomas Fire with a conflict between getting resources to the fire versus getting animals out of the area, in the upper Ojai area. That turned out to be something to learn from, I believe. And so I wonder if, in thinking about that, whether places like upper Ojai, to avoid that type of conflict, need to think of refuge areas. I'm thinking of you have a new facility up there, there's Summit School. I don't have answers to this, but I wonder if we need to really think through comprehensively about this. Because one of the issues in these emergencies is, to me, is how to avoid gridlock. And the artful use of these sufficient capacity for animals and people, I think, is going to be associated with how you avoid gridlock, which could create probably the greatest risk to life or safety of anything. In terms of the traffic areas, if those get overrun with fire because we're trying to get people out but can't get them out fast enough on the vulnerable 2 lanes. So I just wanted to bring up those points that I think we really need to think through.
Well, that is what the assessment that I'm referring to is going to address, Bill. is looking at that. I mean, what this kind of modeling does is to take a lot of the demographic information, a lot of stuff we've gotten from the public survey that we took, other kinds of information, and put that into a series of models that tell us under various scenarios what is the best thing to do. Also, it also points toward the ideal location of evacuation centers, TRAs, etc. I will also add that this particular aspect, actually the entire grant, but this particular aspect is in direct collaboration with Ventura County OES and the sheriff and the fire department, who are putting in kind into this and are formal collaborators. So hopefully we can get this funding, because I think it's going to go a long way toward answering the kinds of questions that the issues you're talking about, so we can formulate intelligent plans with a number of well thought out contingencies.
Good.
I think one of the places we need to go back, and I'm sure Mr. Roper and Mr. Danch can help along with police and fire, is we have about a half a dozen choke points. And with those choke points, it's gridlock and you're done. So when Denison grade went up, that's it. No evacuation down. It was closed, fire on both sides of the road. That's a choke point. We need to make sure that we have a place where people can go to that aren't going to be able to get past these choke points. I mean, we have another great choke point down at Powerhouse Turn at Casitas. When that was burning on both sides of the road, you're not leaving. We have another choke point at Devil's Gorge. When that burns up in the riverbed, that's going to come up. We've got massive brush on both sides. So we need to make sure that we space out our animal shelters, and we need to space out where people can go, and they need to have a number of access, and we need to start designating them because they don't know. In past years, probably 15 years ago, FireSafe had a map, and he had a pull-out in the phone book, and that actually showed places where you can actually go shelter. Maybe we have a little bit of history, we can get that, but we need San Antonio School to be an animal shelter because they've got a big enough field and it doesn't flood in. We need Miramonte School with that great big giant the area they're tearing up now, where we have the big fields and the big lawn area, and we have a huge amount of clearance and parking. We need Miners Oak School. We need these big places that are big, established, plenty of defensible space, clearance, where we can start getting the animals. In the Malibu fire of '93, we had problems getting units on the street because we had so many people with horses and animals and flocks of sheep and all that stuff, actually literally blocking the roads that you couldn't get fire units where we needed them in time. So this is a valley-wide problem that we're going to have to do a lot of coordination. I think the most important thing is people don't know when there's a fire, where do I go? I think that's the single biggest issue that we have now. Is we don't communicate, we have it designated, so anyhow.
James, if I may. Yeah. I totally agree with you. The only thing that I'm kind of thinking about is if we put out those designated locations, they may be in the range of a fire coming through the city, and now we put out that information prior to any emergency, and people are automatically going to these locations, and now they're in danger. So I think it's important. I think you brought up once before about the radio station and putting out advertising where people can get information, real-time information as to where they should shelter, because we all know fires are completely unpredictable. They could be going in one direction 1 minute, and the next minute they change course and they devastate another community or another neighborhood. So it's really important to really evaluate where we shelter folks. My advice would be just not putting that information out now as to where they can go, because it just might put them in danger. But rather put that information out as a situation's occurring, and correct, anybody can pipe in here, but I think it's important to get real-time information out to the folks and where to go. as well as the animal shelters where they can take their animals so they're safe as well.
And I do concur, Chief. What I am concerned is that we haven't evaluated and predetermined where all these places are. So we can give real-time information to, we don't want to go here. We want you to go here. But see, we haven't picked the we want you to go here.
Yeah.
We haven't picked it. We don't have any evaluation. We don't have any communication with those people. We don't have an agreement we can use it, right? And so we need to go around and scope out the valley and go, where do we have the biggest space? Where do we have access and availability, right? I mean, you put a bunch of animals somewhere, you're going to need some water somewhere. We have limited places where we can actually put people in safe areas out of harm's way. So I would hope, I don't know who does this, but I'm hoping that somebody can look at the valley and say, hey, this is the best place, this is the best place, and divide it up into 3 or 4 segments. Again, what I'm concerned with is we had people trying to go up 150 to get out, and then we had a car stall, and that was it, and it stopped the whole train. And we were lucky that fire didn't go up there for 3 more days, because we'd have had a mess. I mean, we were lucky, and we were so lucky, and I don't want to depend on luck to save the community this next time. And there will be a next time, and a time after that. So,
Yeah, I
Anyhow.
think. Yeah, I think everybody's okay with it.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, my name's Fred Drennan. I was a safety consultant for 40 years with a background heavy in fire prevention, oil field, offshore oil platforms, hazardous materials. My experience in wildfires is 0. I have no background in it. But I wanted to talk about Bob. I live on the corner of Baldwin and Rice Road, if you know where that is, Frontier Paints. And during the Thomas fire, the cars were backed up all the way up over the bridge, up into my house. And I got on my mountain bike and I started riding around, and the problem I had with it as a safety person, the people were in a panic mode. I was very careful. There was about 3 or 4 times people were going down the bike path in their cars. They were going the wrong way on the streets. They were, and the people in my park, I have 104 homes in the Golden Oaks Mobile Home Park, and they were in a panic mode there, and I was trying to calm everybody down, and it was almost like trying to fight a fire itself with the way and they were seniors. These people were college graduates, and I was wondering, how do we calm this down, and how do we control these people? That traffic jam was out there for a couple hours, and so I got on my bike, and all the rumors, this is the other issue about what goes on in a park like mine, the rumors started flying there that Thatcher School burned down and Ojai Valley Inn burned down, and I said, hey, everybody meet at the clubhouse. I'll get on my bike, and I'll ride my bike. And I went to all the places the rumors are going. And I go, okay, the school's still there. Then I went over to Montessori School, yeah, it's still there. And I came back, it's all still there. I said, so stay here, don't get on the freeway, don't panic. And my neighbor, he's a pharmacist, and he had the back hatch of his car open, threw the dog in there, threw the cat, and then he grabs his wife, and I'm going, whoa, don't panic. He was going to throw her in there. He was just, everybody was nuts. So I think that part of this program, you're going to have to, I really agree with Bob on that issue. We need to have signboards or something that tell everybody, all of these tracks, you need to go here and here, but everybody wanted to leave the valley. 33 was booked, 150 was, and I was right there on the ground central of this whole problem. And so I think part of your planning process is that human element that these people just, they were practically hysterical. It was, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it, and that was all in the Thomas fire, and it could possibly happen again, So I think part of your plan is very good. I'm using it as my model to take our community and turn it into a fire adaptive community. So we started last week, and we did 54 homes Monday, and we're doing another 50 today. and we're just evaluating the canopy. So I'm setting a risk assessment from 1 to 3. Then we're going to do the ember zone. Then we're going to do the issue with our properties next to the Land Conservancy. So we're in this zone, and Bob has asked to, or offered his services to come out and help me out in this project, because it's real complex what we have here. This was an old campground back in the 60s, and then they brought in mobile homes to turn it into it. And our whole park is covered in oak trees. It's a whole canopy there. And the trees are in the middle of the street, and it's a real unique situation. And the other one that we have is that it's privately owned. So we have a enforcement power over the residents there, and some of them are pretty bad. So I hopefully that maybe in about 6 months, some of you folks will come over and see what we did, because it's applicable to what you're doing. We have handicapped people, we have people just living on Social Security, and so I'm really learned a lot. I think this is one of the best documents I've ever read, and this is excellent. So anyway, part of this evacuation, I want you to really consider the human element. It's gets pretty scary. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, it ties in with so many of the things we're talking about, and that was why the point I was trying to make about the CERT and the need to have, like, you know, trained, ready volunteers to respond, because we heard it a lot during the Thomas Fire. You know, we're a small town, so people said, why weren't people going door to door and knocking on doors? And we just didn't have the bodies. So it's what you're doing sounds awesome. We're definitely interested in hearing more. So
I just want to say thank you, Fred, for coming and sharing and doing, you're really inspiring. So.
Oh, I'm gonna, just one more comment. This part of this assessment on Monday we were doing, a lady came out of her house and wanted to know what we were doing. I had a 10-foot PVC pipe, and I was measuring a canopy from the roof, just holding it up, and then the safety committee ladies were with me. Lady came down. She said that the insurance company came out and told her she had to cut back 14 feet from the roof. I was going, no, 12. And she only had 2 days left before they were going to, her policy was going to be canceled. She's living on Social Security, has no money, didn't have the ability to have arborists come and trim these oak trees down. And I found out there's this is going on in our park, so I hope that if I can, maybe you folks can help us in this direction, if we could get certified that we are, or stamp of approval of some sort, that this park, 104 homes, is a community-based fire adaptive community, that we're looking at all these issues of the wooden stairways and canopies and stuff like that. So, but she happened to be lucky in that a crew came in from the park owners. A dead oak tree was out there, and she went and told her problem, and the owner says, yeah, go ahead, and they bonsai'd her. I call it bonsai'ing, but they raised it up, and she got her insurance going on. So this is at the state level, and I sent Bob the link where they're going to start community-based insurance rating in places like Ojai. There's 13 counties that a third of all the carriers pulled out. They're not going to write homeowners insurance. So it's already happening in my park. And so hopefully we can get the program that you folks are putting here. And I really hope we can be a model for you, and how the whole 104 people, homes pulled together and made it fire resistant. Okay.
For Fred, could you get me a copy of that document that you've got for the 13th?
Through Laura.
Okay, thank you.
It's a valuable document. Everyone in this room should read it. It's at the state level already, and it's under the guidance of Newsom. He's directed the Commission of Insurance to evaluate and keep these carriers in the state.
okay. Thank you. And that ties in with the next item on our list, number 6, and I'll try to actually. I know we're probably long, so I'll try to get through these quickly, but number 6 is create a viable risk assessment of the city so insurance companies can improve insurance coverage and provide incentives. And there's some more information there. This is, I think, something that's that has privately been started. I don't know if Bob Roper or Bob Daddy have more information on that, but so that's one I don't have a whole lot of information on, and so I guess looking for feedback. Any thoughts, or do we keep it on the list? I see Chris popped on. Chris, do you have something?
You're right. Well, again, as part of the we have both the CAL FIRE grant and the SFA grant. SFA grant is to do a local CWPP, which will address some of the issues that we're talking about. And of course, the recent appropriation by the city to the Fire Safe Council, thank you, will be directed toward that effort in the event we get that grant. But also within the CAL FIRE grant is a fine scale risk mapping program for almost $500,000. Actually, it's more than that when you include the $125,000 cash match from the county for an Ember CAS zone mapping, which is countywide, but otherwise the fine scale is for our area, which is roughly the Ojai Valley area plan. So under OVMAC. So we will be addressing a lot of those issues about looking at a wide range of data layers to form that fine scale risk mapping. The ultimate product will be a dashboard that's accessible on your PC, your phone, whatever, that actually has, the GIS layers on there in a very user friendly format. So again, fingers crossed we get that, because that fine scale risk mapping program will go a long ways toward giving the kind of information we need under this plan to take the kind of actions we need and do that intelligently.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one thing I'm learning, which I'm glad. I think it sounds like Fire Safe Council has a lot of these in progress too. So I think one takeaway will be that we'll make sure as the city to coordinate with Fire Safe Council closely on these, and especially as we move forward this year with our partnership. So, anybody have anything to add to number 6? No. Okay. Number 7, conduct public workshops to raise community awareness and to learn how to live with wildfires. Working with 7A notes it's working with the fire district to do Ready, Set, Go programming, and B, doing tabletop drills. I think these are crucial key parts of any plan. I think one thing we had started to talk about doing a public tabletop drill after we had done a couple of our internal training ones, and when COVID hit, that got pushed aside. But I do think that a key to any part of this program is going to be doing these public workshops. So I think this is something that the city definitely would promote and take lead on. So any comments on number 7? Okay.
Another comment would be, under the existing same CAL FIRE grant is a large education component funded under that countywide, but also each Fire Safe Council has an allocation of funding to conduct that. We are going to do this local CWP, whether we get this SFA grant or not. In that grant, in that plan, there'll be a number of community workshops, both live and Zoom, that will go over this stuff. That alone will be a great educational component in addition to just community engagement, which is part of the reasons for having a CWPP. So just to keep the city informed that we are, one way or other, we're moving forward on the local CWPP, which will be complementary to and integrated into the countywide, which is also being updated under the lead of Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council, but involving all of us, all 4 Fire Safe Councils. And we're on the executive committee to do that. So that's something where there's this formal collaboration spreading across the county that is, I think, is going to be a tremendous help in getting this done and getting the funding to do it.
Thank you. Bob.
I would like to see us do the community information the way we did when the paper sponsored the lawsuit information, and we had a panel of people.
Mhm.
And we did it at the Boyd Center, and we needed twice the Boyd Center. We didn't have it. We have done a number of things. The Agora Foundation does a number of talks, and they do it at Matilaha, and that's fine, but then Matilaha really doesn't have the available space for the people to come. I would hope that if we can do some outreach, get all of the different organizations we need there, get the right panel, we get the right people involved, send out the 1,200 CERT people, get those people to start getting in. The paper will go ahead and give a blast. Let's get people involved and see what's going on. I think the biggest unresolved question we have is we don't know what the public's questions are. So without knowing what their questions are, we can't fill a lot of the needs as to what the real problems are. It's always ask and they will tell us. So if we could get the gym and we could do a couple of community workshops, make these things far enough out where we can really get the things cranked up, advertised, get input. I'm going to want the Land Conservancy. We're going to want a lot of different components there. And that will allow the community to get involved. Now, years ago, 20 years ago, Supervisor Bennett at that time would have community involvement just as workshops, and we would take over the entire center and we would do things about the community, and he ran a series and it was packed. We have that many people that actually want to get involved. We have people that are involved. So I really think we need to get into the workshop and let people know what's going on. And the disturbing thing is I called a young man that interned in my office. He ended up being a State Farm agent in Paradise. And I called him 2.5 months ago. Of the 18,000 homes that they lost, residential facilities, and that was November 8th of 2018. 700 of the 18,000 have been built and occupied. It looks like decades in the making to restore. I think what we need to do is make sure that we never have to restore and put all time, money, and efforts into removing the hazard that we have. We have the ability to do it. We got the brains to do it. We just haven't started putting everything together to make this a fire adaptive community, a fire hardened community, or a fire safe community. So I'm hoping we can get involved.
Thank you. Any other comments on public workshops? Sounds like overall support for those.
Mr. Vega, Bob Roper here.
Yeah.
I just need to leave by 11:50 if you have any last minute questions for me before I leave.
Okay. Anybody have, we can, those last few, we had a couple that were done, and then there's.
I have
some
some, I have some
so-
comments on 9 before
Yes.
Mr. Roper
So,
leaves, when
yeah,
it's
if there's any
appropriate.
specific one, yeah, go for it.
Okay, want me to go now?
Mhm.
Okay, on number 9. I speak up frequently on this, but I really think that we, not to the detriment of any of the structure hardening programs, but I really would hate to see the regional fuels reduction process and eradication of invasive species take anything of a back seat, because it's just as much of a fire risk as the structure hardening. And in particular, every time I see Edison pruning an invasive species when it costs very little extra money to remove it, whether it's pine trees or eucalyptus or Mexican fan palms, I wonder why we don't have a protocol, why we can't work together through this disaster council to put pressure on Edison to have a protocol of removal rather than pruning of invasive species. Get the fire department behind that request, and the whole gamut, whether that could be done. I think it's possible. We've had some discussions with Edison in the past, and they frankly are sensitive about people criticizing them for removing trees, and I think we ought to take the issue head on here when I think from a risk-reward point of view, it makes a lot of sense to remove rather than prune species that are creating fuel load risk problems in the valley-wide. That's number one. I think we ought to work with Edison on that on the right-of-way. Number two, I wish we could get more aggressive on the Arundel issue. I wonder if maybe we could, I've talked about this before, where the risk to stream flow, habitat, health, and of course human beings and everything else often gets thwarted by various challenges to the Arundel removal, but either by the Fish and Wildlife people or private property owners. And I wish we could get a little bit more pointed about maybe working with the Ventura County Fire Department on the public health and safety aspect of not removing these high Arundel growths that are very profound fire risk. Maybe look at getting aggressive on some negative declarations, some neg decks on going in and including Arundel mitigation, even if it's not removing the species, at least cutting it down as part of our brush clearance situation. You look at some of these critical masses of Arundel in these stream beds that are close to houses and other types of density vegetation. And I just think we ought to think about, maybe through this council, think about how to coordinate, maybe how to work with the Ventura County Fire Department and being kind of push the envelope a little bit in terms of things like Arundel removal and invasive species removal and rights of way. I just want to get that out there for the record.
Thank you.
I'd like to add that we have been, the Fire Safe Council for over 20 years has been involved with fuel reduction and vegetation management projects. I will say that the funding for that has become very tight in terms of the additional funding that this Fire Safe Council has received to the tune of $1 million to do this work. That is very difficult to get today just because the pool is actually very small, despite the talk about all this money being out there. An example would be the $1 billion announced by the state. 3% of that's for communities. So we're fighting over crumbs. They're bigger crumbs in some of the pools, but they're still crumbs. But our flagship program right now in terms of fuel reduction is the grazing program, and we recently received a small grant from the State Water Resources Control Board, which is kind of a breakthrough in recognizing the use of animals. So obviously, animals are part of a three-step process to work on challenges like Arundel. So I'll be updating the City Council on that as well. But
But part of what I don't understand is that we have a well-established principle of brush clearance by private property owners out of stream beds. And yet we don't seem to extend that principle to private property owners for the water courses under their control that are part of private property. Why can't we have brush clearance inclusive of Arundel that we expect of private property owners when it gets into the water courses? I've never quite understood this. And that's not money. That's just a private property responsibility. That's not public money, in other words. Just a thought. Not understanding.
It'd be a change to the weed abatement program guidelines, right? Right now, isn't it 500 feet from any structure?
100.
100 feet, that's right.
Most of all the river bottoms are all watershed protection.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my point.
Watershed protection.
That's my point, but many of them are also private property.
Small portions.
Yeah.
Small portions are.
Well, they're either public or private property. And the brush clearance requirements are on public property as well as private, that the Ventura County Fire Department promulgates.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to say is why couldn't we think about how to have brush clearance standards for public and private property owners applied the same way that we apply brush clearance, and work with the watershed protection to accomplish that?
Well, they are held. The standard is the standard to everybody, whether it's private property or public property. The standards are the standards. It's if they meet the intent and criteria of the program. So
I understand.
So that's where it's hard, because most of the Arundel is not within 100 feet of the structure.
I understand. I'm suggesting we think about changing some of these
Modifying the standard.
guidelines.
I'm all for it.
That's what I'm talking about. We get to work with the fire department to change some of these guidelines because it is such a profound fire risk. The density of fuel load that we see in some of these water courses and why we can't think through how to change these guidelines to get more, not necessarily waiting for separate discrete funding, but just make it part of a private and public property ownership responsibility. So anyway, just my thought.
I think that'd be a really good topic for like, as a main topic for one of the upcoming meetings. I think that'd be something we can dig into.
Mr. Vega?
Yeah. Yes.
I think the major flaw that we have is we're saying structures. I don't really care about structures. If we got rid of CAL FIRE, just totally eliminated CAL FIRE, and we took all that money and we just paid everybody for everything they lost in the forest, we'd be money ahead, and we'd reduce the risk, and we would stop. It would help the climate change. It would help the air. Just eliminate CAL FIRE, let everything burn, and then just pay them out of the fire budget. We'd be better off. That's not going to happen. What we do, though, is we say that you have to have a safety margin around a structure. We need to go in and we need to change that to you need to have a margin around an evacuation path, because it's more important to remove the Arundel on Creek Road, where there are no structures in that area that are going to prevent people from going down that road and getting the heck out of here.
That's my point. Let's
And
think through
so
these guidelines.
What I'm saying
okay?
is why aren't we changing
Right.
the criteria to certain paths of ingress and egress for safety, designated safety?
Right, we need to look at the entire
areas.
fire ecology and not just the artificial distance from structure.
I mean, when you go through certain areas, I mean, there are a lot of areas they're not getting out of. They're not getting out of town. They're not going to get to Ventura when we have certain areas go up. It's just going to stop. We're going to have a fire barrier. So
Thank you, Bob.
Take
I'll
care,
follow
Bob.
up with you after the meeting, Bob.
Thank you so much, Bob. Much gratitude to you for this amazing plan.
Thanks, Bob.
So specifically, who would be in charge of controlling and changing the vernacular on that?
Well, I think, I
And
mean,
including designated escape routes.
we obviously could do it within the city, but I think I understand the big concern is going to be like Creek Road, for example. So I think it'd have to be something that we would propose to the county. So
Fire Protection District. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
City Council.
More public works, because
Okay.
you're talking about roads now.
Okay.
But yeah, it's.
Well,
big-
Public Works,
it's-
in terms of Edison, yes.
It's big county is what we
Yeah.
have to go for.
I mean, some of the worst examples of Mexican fan palm fire risks are in county parks, frankly. Valley Trail and things like that. So that's part of the comprehensive fire ecology view I think we need to look at carefully.
So I propose putting that on a future agenda and making sure,
Yeah.
we'll make sure to invite Brian.
And
Brennan.
one other comment I don't think we need to ignore is that clearly well-irrigated citrus groves are part of the fire ecology mitigation that allows the fire department to more effectively protect structures. And if we start seeing, because of water stress or other kinds of issues, losing vast amounts or large amounts of irrigated citrus, we lose an important buffer. And so that comes into how we price water, how we manage our water resources to try to minimize the need for these orchards to use expensive potable water to keep these orchards alive. Land processes, land planning processes. So the issue of the overall fire ecology includes, and the vegetation management includes more than just the invasive species. I just thought we might want to mention that at some point. I've been told many times by the fire department that you really, really are happy in the path of a fire front to see an irrigated orchard that you can use.
Other than the damages an orchard to the.
An irrigated citrus grove, yeah.
You'll talk to avocado orchard farmers and they'll say, let my house burn down, don't let my orchard burn down.
Right, but the citrus especially doesn't really carry fire, is what I'm hearing from fire professionals. It's an important part of defense, of the defense perimeter.
So I think Bob Roper had to jump off, so we'll follow up with him. I think we've hit on the big ones. Number 10 was more about CERT, which I think we talked about, and to me will be a key project. We work with the county and the supervisor's office to try to get going. Number 11, our number 12 has already been completed, which was the community readiness event. Probably the two main ones left is number 11 and number 13. 11 was kind of the point of today's meeting, which was have the disaster council, give feedback and ultimately approve this plan to move forward to the city council. So I think that's kind of the remaining action at this point is, will the disaster council support it moving forward? We have it currently tentatively scheduled for August 10th to the city council. So any feedback on that?
Let's do it. Why?
How are you going to handle, are you going to consider some of these edits? But yeah, absolutely, it needs to get to council as soon as possible.
Yeah, so what I would propose, Bob Roper and I both, I saw him taking notes and I was taking notes, so I will work with him, and as the two council members without any quorum issue, I'll make sure to submit the feedback to you, and then we can take that and go on August 10th. So with that, that one, I think if we could have a vote so that when we put the report to the city council, we can note that the disaster council, recommended that it move forward to the city council. So that one I'll ask. I think I heard a motion from Bear Sticks and a
Second it.
from
Sure.
Councilmember Wyrick. So Andrea, can you call a roll call of the members?
Mayor Sticks,
Yes.
James Vega,
Yes.
Chief Rivera,
Yes.
Councilmember Wyrick,
Yes, and thank you, Mayor, for pushing this along.
Chief Mundy.
Yes.
Is that all? Or is it Bob
Bob
Daddy? I'm
Daddy.
sorry. Mr.
Yes.
Bob Daddy.
And Bob Roper is absent,
Bob
but
Roper's absent.
I'm sure he'd support it. So with that, I was going to suggest adding, it's ironically a number to the plan, but we'll work through that. I was going to suggest focus on weed abatement and arundo removal. I think we talked about that. That's in the regional fuel reductions process number 9. So with that, I think we have completed the item before us. Does anybody have anything else on that topic before we move forward to the next discussion item, which should be hopefully a 30-second item? Yeah.
Did we pass by 13?
Yeah. So yes, we passed by 13.
Is there a reason?
I was just in the interest of time. If we want to spend a couple minutes on it, I'll start that one just by saying I had talked about Roper before the meeting about this item. Originally, there was talk about hiring a full-time person. I told Bob Roper, I've worked in cities that had full-time emergency coordinators. I always thought of it as wasteful. I didn't think that they had, especially if you don't have fire and police service that you handle in-house, that there was not a lot of work for those highly paid full-time positions. So he and I discussed, and we talked about, we've been handling a lot of these things in-house with the current staff level, which has been a challenge, I think, mostly because of COVID and the fact that we were very shorthanded and trying to handle this at the same time. I think a couple of the key positions we have that would be involved in this are vacant and probably will be vacant for a little bit longer, like the public information officer / events person, and the office assistant to the city manager, which would handle some of the public information as well. So when I spoke with Bob Roper before the meeting, I had told him I could see potentially hiring a contractor with these specific tasks, but I wouldn't support a full-time or even a part-time employee position. And so that's the recommendation here. I'd like to say, and I think that we could handle it even without hiring a contractor, but when there are competing needs, this is the kind of stuff that does tend to get pushed to the side when other issues come up. So I'm not opposed to the idea. So,
Well, I'm just going to throw this out because it's the elephant in the room. When we go to the next one, fiscal, what we keep saying is we're broke, we don't have any money. We have a huge amount of needs and we have no money. it's time that we become the adults and we do a couple of things. We identify the shortfall, and if you really need another $500,000 out of the budget, you really need that. It's really something that we can do. We just haven't filled it in, but that's the need. Then we need to identify where the money's going to come from. And that is going to be sales tax, and that is going to be the city council responsible to go ahead and fill in this budget. I've been here for over a quarter of a century, and I get to hear the repeat. We don't have enough money. Well, you know what? I think Oxnard's got like a 9.25% sales tax, and we've got a 7.25. It is time that we understand that we've exceeded our limits. We have exceeded our limits, and we haven't bucked up, and we haven't done those things necessary to get the level of service that is really minimal, that we really, really need. And this community is sitting here with an increase of in excess of 20% land value each year. The prices are staggering. We looked at a little tiny house for insurance the other day. 700 square feet is selling for over $769,000. And if we can't afford 1% of sales tax in this community to protect this community from becoming a paradise, then it's a sad, comment on our community. And I'm not going to condemn the community. They haven't been asked to participate, and they don't know what the real problem is, and they don't know what the goal and the solution is. I think it's time that we start doing that. I think it's time for a mayor's letter to come out, tell the people what the hell we need to do. It's time for the city manager to do it, and it's time for the council to get in and resolve this issue and put it as a priority item. We do lots and lots of wasted time at council with all kinds of insignificant things. When you no longer have a city, those insignificant things, it would be a shame to say that we have time for this, an emergency for that, and we can do this, and those things pale. They're trivial. They're trivial, and they take up the vast amount of time. And when we have something as important as this, it really hasn't gotten attention. So I think that you need, James, you need to tell our city council exactly how much more budget we really need, and we need to evaluate it, because you've got the cannabis tax, which is in flux, and that can be moved depending on what the election situation is we can put a ballot on there for at least a 1% increase. Santa Barbara's got a 1% designated. The other communities have a 1% designated, and we're sitting here, struggling. We're just barely above board. But we're only above board with the minimum services. We're not where we need to be, even with adequate services. Adequate services are a lot more than is being provided. So if we were to fill everything in and do what is adequate, yeah, we have a large gap. So I think we need to discuss that more instead of emergency formula stores. This is an emergency. The formula stores isn't. This is an emergency, not the inn getting a permit to go ahead and do a remodel on a Friday with the entire city council so they can move with their permit and start building. I cannot understand why this is not a council emergency to mitigate the fire risk, educate the people as to what they do in a disaster, how they save themselves, and get out. I don't know why anything gets on council above this issue. So, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. So at this,
Well, now that we have a plan, we have something to sell, so we're ready.
yeah, and when we bring the plan, we'll know costs for different things, and that'll give us the opportunity to talk about how we're going to pay for it. So.
Well, I will also
I
add
think
that you
was the
guys have
plan.
taken
We'll
the
move
first
it
step.
forward. I think we've had a couple items raised that we'll need to discuss further, and we'll do that as part of implementing these plans too. So The last item on the agenda is actually very simple. I know every few months we send an email out. We ask if people have some time, and it works okay. But I've had a couple of people ask a few times, can't we just set a regular meeting? So we put an item on the agenda to let us talk about if we want to set a regular meeting and when that would be, or if we are okay with kind of just calling them as needed every couple or few months. So I think for planning purposes, just so people have it on their calendar, that's probably the main reason why a regular scheduled meeting would work well. But I wanted to just get feedback and see if there was a way we were leaning. So
I like the idea of having the dates. They can always be canceled if there's no need for the meeting, but it allows planning.
yeah. Okay. Anybody, I guess let's do it this way. Anybody opposed to just setting regular meetings? I think, Captain Monday, is this going to be your last one, you think, if the next one's in October?
If it's early October, you got me.
Okay. I think, it is early October, so we got you for one more. And I should have asked, do you have somebody to introduce?
So this is Division Chief Todd Leak. He was recently promoted. We're still waiting for a little bit more different transition to happen.
Okay.
And then come the end of October, Todd will take over my city responsibilities for City of Ojai, Santa Paula, and Hueneme. So
Wow.
he's just kind of getting introduced to what I do and where I go.
Thank you. Well, welcome from the.
Welcome.
Welcome, and thank you for coming today.
So I think I hear a consensus that we'll schedule a regular meeting. We had recommended doing, actually it was the fourth Wednesday of each month. So you may have actually gotten out of it if that holds, but we recommended the fourth Wednesday of each month at 10 a.m. So we'll move forward with that plan. We can tweak it as needed, but actually let's take a vote on that, just because I do want the record to show we're setting a regular meeting and the minutes to show that for the public. So can you call for a vote, Andrew? To set a regular meeting, or I'm sorry, I don't have a motion. Can I have a motion to set the regular meetings for the fourth Wednesdays of January, April, July, and October at 10 a.m.?
Yes.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, City Manager Vega,
Yes.
Mayor Betsy Sticks.
Yeah, yes.
Sorry, Chief
Oh, that's
Rivera.
okay. I like it.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick.
Yes.
Chief Mundy,
Yes.
Mr. Bob Daddy.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so with that, the plan will move forward on August 10th, and we'll keep the group in the loop as that moves forward, and we'll send some information out. But with that, I think we are ready to adjourn.
Thank you, James, for all your work. Well, thanks, everybody, for being here and doing all this wonderful work. Is the top priority, always safety. So thank you all for being here, and we're adjourned.
Thank you.